Hi, I'm Bob, and welcome to Between the Sheets, where we look at Microsoft Excel and related technologies. There are two more new functions in Excel 365 I want to show you. The take and drop functions will reproduce an existing range of cells, but collect only the rows and columns you want. They work in opposite ways. The take function grabs only the specific rows and columns you specify and leaves the rest, and the drop function takes the entire range while leaving behind specific rows and columns you don't want. Of course, you can do this by copying and pasting, but that's a static one-shot operation. A function is dynamic, so the result can change. In previous versions of Excel, it was very difficult to do any of this, so these functions make complicated, difficult formulas much easier. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that as of this recording in mid-November 2022, both functions are still in beta and haven't been released, so you may not have them available yet. But if you have a subscription to Excel 365, you'll have them soon. And both functions will work in the Windows and Mac versions. So let's take a look, see how it works. Here we have an array with 4 columns and 10 rows, and that 10 rows includes the column headers. And that's important because we need to specify numbers of rows and columns in the syntax of the function. So let's take a look at the syntax before we do anything. As I said a moment ago, these functions both work just in the 365 editions, and the syntax for both of them are the same. It's equals take, and then there are 3 arguments. What's the array? Just saw that. What rows do you want to keep? What columns do you want to keep? And if you use the drop function, it's the same thing. The syntax is identical. So let's do a few examples. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say equals take, and notice there's the function name, so I know it's available. I'll just hit the tab key. So the array is the entire thing, including the column header. So I'm going to select that, comma, and let's say I want 4 rows, and that's 4 rows including the column headers. So I'm just going to type in a 4, comma. Now let's say I only want the first 3 columns. I don't care about the capital city, so I'm just going to say 3, close the parenthesis, enter, and there we go. So we have 4 rows including the column headers and the first 3 columns. Now, there's a couple of things that you'll notice right off the bat. The function doesn't take formatting with it, so if you want formatting, you'll have to go and reapply it. The other thing you'll notice is that this is one of the new spill functions. So you could identify it's a spill function because we have this nice shaded border. And the upper left corner, this is where I typed in the formula. You can see it looks normal, but if I click any of the other cells in the result, you notice it's grayed out. So let's say I want all 4 columns, and this time maybe I want an additional row. So let's go, I'm just going to delete this. Now, because this is a spill function, I don't have to select this whole thing. I could just click that cell where I typed in the function and delete. So I'm going to say equals take, and it's going to be the same array. Since I want 5 rows, I'm going to type 5, and because I want all 4 columns, I don't have to specify the number of columns. I could just leave that blank, close the parenthesis, enter. Now I have all the columns and 1 additional row. Now the reverse of that is also true. Let's go and delete that. Let's say I want all of the rows and only 3 of the columns. So I'm going to say equals take. I'm going to grab the same array. I'm going to turn this into a range name in a moment. I want all of the rows, so I'm going to put in an extra comma with nothing in there. And I said I want the first 3 columns, so I'm going to put that in, close the parenthesis, Control Enter. So now I might need to scroll a little bit. So now I have all 10 rows, including the column headers, and only the first 3 columns. So let's say I want to go in reverse. Maybe I want 3 columns, but only state population in capital and not the index. Maybe I want 4 rows, but counting from the bottom, Rhode Island up to Vermont. So let's delete that. First, let's create a range name. I'm just going to click in there somewhere. I'm going to press either Control A in Windows or Command A on the Mac. And then I'm going to go up there into the name box. I'm just going to call this data and enter. So now I can go and choose data, or I can use that in the formula, so I don't have to keep selecting that over and over again. So the way we can grab columns starting from the end or rows starting from the end is using negative numbers. So let's do the take function again. So this time I'm going to use the range name. I'm going to call it data. When I type it in, when I just hit the first D, you see it shows, oh yeah, you've got that range name called data. So I'm going to tab that. And I want, as I said, 4 rows starting from the bottom. Now, this will not include the column headers. Keep that in mind. So to go from the bottom, I'm going to use a negative number. So I'm going to say -4, comma, and I want 3 columns, but state population in capital, so I want going from the end. So I'm going to say -3. Close the parenthesis, Control Enter it. So there we go. The last 4 rows and the last 3 columns. So let's go and use the drop function. So I'm just going to delete that. So I'm going to say equals drop, open up the parenthesis. Again, I want the range called data, comma, and what I want is everything except I don't want the first 3 rows and I don't want the first column. So I'm going to say 3, comma 1. So those are the row and column that I don't want. Close the parenthesis, Control Enter, and there we go. So Pennsylvania is the 4th row, so that's where it starts. And the first column, the index number, that is eliminated, and then we have the other 3 columns. And just like with the take function, we could use negative numbers with this also. So let's just delete that. And I'm going to say equals drop. I'm using that same range called data, comma, and let's say I want everything except maybe the last 2 rows. I'm going to eliminate Connecticut and Rhode Island, comma, and instead of dropping the first column, I want to drop the last column. I want to drop the capital column. So I'm going to say -1. Close the parenthesis, Control Enter, and there we go. Let's scroll down. So you see we are not seeing those last 2 rows, Connecticut and Rhode Island, and we are dropping the last column, not the first column. So let's say I want to format some of this. There is a little monkey wrench in there that I did mention, and that is you can format this spill result, but you can't do it as a table. You have to do it manually, and I'll show you why. On the Home tab, if I go to Format as Table and I choose any format, say, okay, yeah, we have headers. The problem is it's going to give me this error and say, okay, we can't really format this as a table. If you do want to format it as a table, this is all going to be converted to static text. So I don't want to do that. I'm just going to choose no. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to select manually those column headers, and instead of Format as Table, I'm going to go to Cell Styles. I'm going to choose one I want, and then I just have to kind of go and do this manually here, and so on, and then I can go and format the others manually. Will that be fixed in a future version? I have no idea. I hope so. You can see that using negative numbers for rows or columns means there's some overlap between these functions, and in some cases you can use either one for the same result. So until next time, my name is Bob, and this has been Between the Sheets.